And today's subject is on recreation risk. We have a great opportunity working in public service to provide recreation programs, facilities, and other things that really benefit our communities, benefit people's lives, and it's a lot of fun. It's a great thing to be a part of. However, with that comes a significant amount of risk. And with that fun that we have come some giant risks. And unfortunately, we've suffered some large losses when it comes to that. And aside from that, there have been some serious injuries that people have had, even up to and including fatalities of children using our facilities. So as we talk about that, it's not just all fun and games. We need to be serious about the risks that we're facing in our recreation programs and our facilities, whether it be parks, whether it be sports programs, whatever it may be, maybe special events. They're all included. How do we go about avoiding pain, the injury, losses to our organization and to the pool of all of our local governments working together? How do we protect ourselves? Well, let's dive in just with a couple of concepts, and I told you I'm going to go fast on this one, so let's hit fast. Here we've got a nice piece of property, and it's farm ground right now. If I own that farm ground, I'll ask you the question, do I have any sort of liability as it pertains to that farmland? And the answer is yes. What if I go out there and I throw a no trespassing sign on this piece of land? Do I still have some liability? What if people trespass? Even though I posted it appropriately, I may have even put up a fence around this property. Do I still have some liability? The answer is yes, but it's not as much as somebody who I invite onto my property. So if I go out there and I create a park, I plant grass on this piece of property, and I say, hey, anybody that wants to come enjoy this grassy area with a nice view, you're more than welcome to come and use that. Well, there's a different standard of care between a trespasser and somebody I invite to come onto my property. If I have a hazard out there, a hole in that lawn, and somebody drops a leg down into this hole and hurts their knee or something like that, then I'm potentially liable for that. Okay. What if I decide, well, why don't we just throw a playground out there? And well, playgrounds are really expensive, so I've got a couple of old straw bales left around from this farmland that's out there, and an irrigation pipe or a culvert pipe. Let's make a slippery slide out of that. Do I incur more liability? The answer is yes. There's a certain standard of care for each level of improvement that we do. Okay. What if I decide I'm going to charge people to come onto this property? Well, that increases my standard of care even more. So realize that with each different level of use and the type of relationship that we have with people using our property, there's an increased standard of care. What does that mean? That means if you build it, they will sue. If we have property, we have risk that goes along with that. And so we have to identify what the standard of care is. If I have a sidewalk, the standard of care is, even when it's a crazy storm like this, the standard of care is I'm going to clear that sidewalk of snow and put down ice melt if it happens to be ice conditions within a reasonable amount of time. What is that? Well, it kind of depends on the type of storm that we're having. Storms that we've had the last couple of weeks in certain part of the state would not allow you to get to those sidewalks as quickly as we would on a day when we maybe had a couple of inches of snow. When we have a lot of snow and wind, and courts will find that. But what's a reasonable standard of care? If it goes a couple of days after the storm has ended and we haven't done that, I haven't gone out and cleared the snow, it's more than likely that we could face some liability as it comes to those things. Okay. So we want to talk about avoiding losses as it pertains to our recreation, parks programs. We need to show that we're being reasonable and prudent. What would a reasonable and prudent person do? Well, they would get out and shovel their snow within a reasonable time period. If you're a business, that's probably, that standard is a little bit tighter than it would be at our own homes. Okay, we need to be able to prove it. What does that mean? We need to show that we've done the reasonable and prudent thing. So just going with that example, when you shovel snow, write it down. Have a simple checklist that shows that I have cleared the snow, I put down ice melt, and just initial it. Simple as that, but that's a record that's going to show that we've done the reasonable and prudent thing. All right. I want to run through various risk exposures that we have, property general liability and workers' compensation, and talk about that as it pertains to recreation and parks programs, special events. So we all have property when it comes to these recreation programs, whether it be a soccer field or a fairground structure, playgrounds. They come in various forms. It might be a skate park. There are different risks with each one of those things when it comes to property. Here's a couple of points on property. You need to know what you own, and you need to schedule that with the trust. If you want that covered under property coverage, it needs to be scheduled. We've had some occurrences in the past where people have, luckily there wasn't a loss associated with it, a fire or something, but where people were surprised to find that a multi-million-dollar building was not on their schedule, and the reason it wasn't there was because they just forgot to let us know that they built the building. And so make sure that you've got it scheduled. Within the next year, we're going to be doing property appraisals again. And so we'll have folks going out there looking at your facilities and helping to put values on those. And we appreciate your input on that and help in showing our people the facilities so we can get accurate values so that you're protected if you do happen to lose one of those facilities. Ask yourself, what do I cover? Am I going to put insurance on my playground facilities? You say, well, what could happen to that playground facility? Well, I personally would cover that playground structure. Why? Well, because we've had situations where people have gone out, arsonists, and poured gasoline over a playground structure and lit it on fire, and we lose that. How much does a playground structure cost? You can easily pay in the neighborhood of $50,000 to $100,000 or even more for a playground structure. If you decide to not schedule, to not insure a certain piece of property, my advice to you is to cover your tail, is to get a sign-off, get a buy-off from your governing body, whether that be a council or a commission or whatever that, or a board, that whatever that body is. Let them know, okay, here are three things that we are not going to schedule because we don't want to pay insurance on those. That's the governing body's decision to make, but it should be done in full disclosure so everybody understands we're intentionally doing this. Okay. You also want to look at your facilities and document what you own. If you have, go back to that page. If you have something like fine art, occasionally in our recreation areas we'll have some fine art. Realize that it's something that has some intrinsic value to it. Realize that those need to be scheduled separately. Otherwise, that painting is only valued as a frame and canvas and some paint in the event that it's lost. So if it's fine art that has exceptional value besides just some decor, you want to schedule that separately. Okay. Couple of things to protect our property risks. Monthly inspections are important. That's why we have that as part of the TAP program. Is to have is to go out there and physically look at our facilities at least once a month Does that count at parks and recreation facilities during the wintertime? Yes. At least once a month, go out there because things happen. Kids go out and play on those playgrounds even when there's a couple of feet of snow, and sometimes they bring extraneous stuff out, tie ropes on it, and create a really dangerous situation. Let's get out and look at those facilities. Additional stuff that we need to look at are emergency equipment, fire extinguishers, fire suppression systems. If you have sprinklers, boilers and pressure vessels that may be part of our heating system or an air system. Those have some legal requirements. There are also safety requirements, and the majority of those, depending on the size of the boiler, will require an annual inspection from the state. And so, if those are not scheduled or not licensed with the state, you want to look into those. And if you've got questions about that, please give me an email or tell me about that. Let's see. Tag and inventory your emergency equipment, especially in recreation areas where it's wide open to the public. Sometimes this equipment goes missing. Fire extinguisher disappears, somebody damages an emergency light, or any number of different things can happen out there. If we're not continuously looking at those, at least once a month, get out there and look for the equipment. Is it there? Has it been tampered with? The fire extinguishers all in a charged position, and then document these things. Remember, we go back to that reasonable and prudent standard. All right, next one, general liability. So this is the state of being responsible for something. So if we are responsible, if we have a duty, if we have that standard of care. Let's go back to the sidewalk. I have this duty, and I shirk that duty. I don't clear the snow from my sidewalks in front of my premises, and I leave it for a month. And it's really cold winter, and I've got inches of ice out there, and somebody slips. So there's a breach. We have a duty. There's a breach in that duty. Somebody is injured, and the proximal cause of that is the ice that I didn't clear. Then I could be exposed to a lawsuit, and I'm probably going to lose that one. All right. And everybody says, but wait, you can't sue the government. We have governmental immunity. And that's true to a certain extent. However, that is eroding constantly. And we try to defend claims, particularly where we have a potential of losing that immunity. But we need your help to keep yourself from having these suits and keep from having these problems, because it's a continual erosion of our governmental immunity. There are things like inherent risks. It sounds pretty strong. No person can make a claim or recover from any of the following entities for personal injury or property damage resulting from any of the inherent risks of participating in a recreational activity, cities, counties, and local districts. So that sounds pretty strong. The problem is if we have been negligent in what we're doing. So we go back there. I had a picture of a guy getting bucked off a horse and getting kicked. Rodeo, bareback riding, is an inherently dangerous sport. And if you get bucked off of a horse and the horse kicks you in the head, you're on your own. You've made a decision to get on that horse, and that's your decision. So hosting a rodeo may not be as risky because it's inherently dangerous. However, if I'm riding that same bucking horse and there's a bolt sticking out of a fence at our arena, and I'm impaled by that bolt, and I'm seriously injured or I die, guess what? That protection from those inherent risks is not there because we created an unsafe condition. So we have to go out and identify what is our standard of care. People are going to ride horses in a rodeo, but the standard of care is that we have facilities that are not a danger to the person engaging in that activity. Okay. All right. And please, if you have questions, go ahead and type those into the Q&A or the chat box. and I'll answer those as we go along. So how do we avoid liability? And here's some different techniques that we use. One is risk avoidance. This is where my kids call me the fun sucker. If I just say, no, we can't do that because it's too risky, that's risk avoidance. If I don't do it, I don't have the risk, and I probably am not going to end up getting injured or paying out. It's not very much fun, but that is something. There are times when people call us up and say, "Hey, we've got this great idea for an activity to do." I had a call one time that said, "Hey, we have some people that want to teach parkour to teenagers in our city. Would that be a good idea?" Maybe you know what parkour is. That's basically jumping from building to building using these acrobatic techniques to do some pretty crazy stuff. And my response to them was, "What are you thinking?" No, that's not a good idea, because then we're going to have these teenage kids out there jumping from building to building, and that exposes us to risk. So if there's an activity that's just too risky, don't do it. The next technique is called risk retention. We just say, "Yep, we got it. We will take on the risk from this." If we don't identify a hazard, we still own that risk. We've retained that. So that's why we've got to get out and look at our facilities and figure out what our risks are. Okay. Risk transference. This is one of the most common techniques that we have in risk management, and that's transferring the risk to somebody else. Let's say we want to have a special event. Maybe it's well, let's talk about recreation programs, sport programs. We would like to have people playing Little League baseball in our facilities. And there may be an organization out there that will support that, and that's great. We don't necessarily want to take it on ourselves, but we're okay with having kids using our baseball facilities for these recreation purposes. How do we protect ourselves? We've got a third party in there, Little League, whatever the organization is. How do we protect ourselves? Because they're running the show. And the answer is we transfer that risk to them. We have them provide a certificate of insurance showing that they have adequate coverage and that they're also indemnifying us, that they list us as an additional insured on that certificate of insurance, and they indemnify us for our part in providing those facilities. So they take the risk on themselves. So who would we have do this? We'd have contractors, event promoters if we're bringing events into our facilities. And it might be a vendor. So we're having a fair or something like that where people come in and sell something. We want them to also provide proof of coverage and indemnify us. So if they do something dumb, we don't end up on the hook for it. Okay. So as we do that, we just want to ensure that we have language in there that indemnifies us. What limits are reasonable when we're getting indemnified? When we're getting that certificate of insurance, the answer is it really depends. Here's a guideline. Governmental immunity limits are at 2.41 million, and I forgot to check that number. That has a tendency to change each year, and so that number is probably 6 or 8 months old, and I'm not sure if that's gone up yet. That should be our guideline there. The bigger the risk, the more coverage. So if I have somebody selling trinkets in a fair, they probably don't need nearly as much coverage as, say, an event promoter that brings in a demolition derby or something similar. Okay. Remember, your certificate of insurance, you need to secure that from these contractors, and you also need to make sure that it lists your organization as an additional insured. Okay, so I've got a question here. How do you protect yourself from people using your facility inappropriately like your slide with the motorized scooter in the bike park. Yeah. Do you sign your park? Yeah. Excellent question. How do we protect ourselves? And the answer is what you said and some more. We need to let people know what's expected, what is not allowed. So signage is good on that. But the big thing is we need to take action. If we see somebody out there with a scooter in our skate park, what do? Well, we run out there. Maybe we run out there and kick the kids out. That's good. What's better? I would say it would be better to call the police and have the police come out and let those kids that this is inappropriate activity. What does that do for us to have the police do that? Well, one, it takes us out of the conflict, but number two, it lets those kids know that this is serious business. The cops came out, and if I do it again, I might end up getting arrested. And so it has a little more weight to it. Probably the best thing that it does for us is it provides us documentation that shows that we called and we had the police come out and notified them this is against the rules and we can't have you do that anymore. That's really my recommendation of how to go about managing that. Okay, hope that answered your question, and please go ahead and type questions if you have more. Risk transference. If we have somebody renting our facilities, we have a relationship to provide TULIP coverage, tenant user liability insurance program, so they can get a short-term liability policy when they're using that. And there's a link here, and you won't get that, but if you want it, go ahead and send me an email, and I'll send that out to you. If we've got vendors coming, they want to come in and sell pickle on a stick at our fair or other activity that we have, is that risky to our organization? Well, if a whole bunch of people get sick from pickle on a stick, could that come back on us? The guy that's selling pickle on a stick probably doesn't have a ton of money to pay for a whole bunch of people going to the hospital because he or she made them sick. Who owns the event? And that very well could be us. So we want to make sure that those people that are doing something that could be risky to others have coverage. So and we don't have any relationship with this organization. We don't get anything out of it. It's called fastcub.com. It's just an easy way to get short-term liability insurance, and you can buy it for a one-day event, and it's relatively cheap. I've heard of some policies for $50 or $60 for an event when somebody's working as a vendor. So a lot of times we'll have questions. Hey, how do I tell this family that comes out and they sell euros or corn on the cob at our event, and this is the only thing they do all year. How do I make sure that they have coverage? This is a way to do it. Fastcub.com is a pretty simple way to get that coverage. Let's see, more questions. So a few other worries that we have are stock at rodeos. Use a stock provider if you're involved with rodeos. That is a reputable thing. We've seen a few situations where people in the community, ranchers in the community, just bring out some stock that they have and say, yeah, you can use these animals for your rodeo. That puts us and the rancher at risk because we may not have the coverage in place. And so ask the questions, ensure that they've got coverage, and use reputable companies for those types of things. Here's another one. Big concern that we have when it comes to lawsuits. This is a trend that we're seeing, that plaintiff attorneys are looking beyond just the hazard, beyond what happened, and they're looking at our systems that we have in place to deal with management, and they're looking specifically for bad supervisors, bad managers, and trying to impugn our credibility and say, this, you had a supervisor here that had multiple situations where they broke the rules or they did inappropriate things, and that casts a bad light on us as an organization, and in a claim that may be questionable, or maybe even it's one that we've got everything in place. That might be something that could turn a jury to a point where we're going to lose or settle a claim like this. So, with that said, we need to, we manage our employees, we discipline our employees when they do something wrong, but ask yourself, what do we do about our supervisors? If I have a problem with a supervisor, do I document anything about that? If I have a really bad supervisor, do we keep them in that position? If this person is a risk to our organization, maybe they don't need to be a supervisor. Maybe we need to look at a different position for them. Because that's one of those real focuses that those plaintiff attorneys will look at, is if we leave an unqualified or an inept supervisor or manager in their job, they're going to pick that apart and say, this is the standard of care that you have, and you didn't meet it, and so you owe my client a whole bunch of money. Okay. Any questions on that? So just action. Look at your disciplinary actions for supervisors and managers. Are we documenting things? Are we taking action? What's our daily practice? Do we just look past the actions of a supervisor or manager that's not doing the job right? Take action when you see it. Okay. Want to hit events quickly. One of the major concerns that we have is that we always want to have these events be bigger and better and more exciting. And so we sit in a planning committee meeting, and somebody says, "You know what would be awesome?" And then we go down a really bad road by bringing in some events that are scary. So we need to decide what our acceptable risk levels are and stick to those. If somebody comes to us that's beyond that risk tolerance, we need to shut it down. So ask yourself, is it crazy? There are some things that a governmental entity just shouldn't do. There are things that we should stay as far away from as we possibly can. And squirrel suits flying off of mountains is probably one of those. Is it covered? There are certain things that are excluded from our policy, and that's done for a reason. People say, well, why do you exclude those? The reality is not everybody has the coverage, and when you have a broad form the way that we do, you want to make sure that if there's something that's really risky, we don't throw that in, because otherwise that affects the cost of everybody. So certain things, aircraft. If you decide, hey, you know what would be cool? Let's bring. I've got a friend that owns a plane. He'll fly over the soccer field and throw candy out. That's a risky activity, and aircraft is specifically excluded. So if you want to do that, we can cover that, but you have to get an additional policy for it. Don't recommend that. Rebound devices, those bounce houses or trampolines, those are also specifically excluded. We can cover it, but you have to buy additional coverage for that because it's really risky activity. Mechanical amusement rides, things like that as well. So make sure that you've got the event or the activity that you've got covered. And then look at the event and say, can you realistically do this? Can you legally do it? We've seen a few situations where members may have been illegally setting off fireworks. They didn't have the appropriate training and personnel in place to do that. So look at that closely. A lot of people say, well, we got the fire department doing that. That may be true, but your firefighters need to be certified shooters. That means they need to attend a class and additionally have some experience prior to being able to shoot fireworks. If you have a firework contractor do that, same thing goes that we said about other contractors. Have a contract secure a certificate of insurance that indemnifies you, lists you as an additional insured. All right. Mass gatherings. If we're doing large gatherings of people, there's a state law right there, 392-400. The health department is the organization that generally regulates this, but ensure that you've covered all of those things. Sanitation, first aid, really look closely at that and think going into it. If you've got a really risky event, it's maybe a demolition derby. I've got to tell you, I got a call last summer from my son, my 17-year-old son, and he says, "Hey, I'm riding in a race tonight." A race? What are you talking about? Yeah, come down to the arena. I won't say where. Come down to the arena, and they have these trash car races, and I'm doing a little event in between. It scared me. I walked out there, sat at this event, and it scared me to death. Now, it wasn't one of our members that was running this. It was a contractor there, but it scared me to death. Let's look at these risky events. Demolition derbies, are they risky? Yeah, we've had multiple fatalities, and they're generally volunteers at these events. They're not people riding in the cars. They're people working around that. There have been multiple fatalities in the state, and some near tragic events that have happened. So let's look at that. Let's look at the coverage that we have, make sure it's adequate, have an event safety plan. If you've got a contractor coming in using your facility, we want to have good assurance from them that this is going to be a safe event. So if it's our event, though, we want to designate an event safety officer, somebody who is responsible for that. We need to perform regular inspections. How do we fix things if there's a problem? How do we shut down? Maybe if we have a lightning storm come in, a thunderstorm comes in, do we have a lightning hold policy? What if something bad happens? What's our procedure if an incident happens? How do we control people? All these are questions prior to going into an event, and if we can't cover it, maybe we don't need to run that event. Volunteers. Let's see, just check for questions. Volunteers. Most of us couldn't run our programs without volunteers. They're super important, but they're also they're also a situation that can cause us some problems if we don't manage our volunteers adequately. So our process for selection and approval of volunteers should involve a process similar to hiring somebody. We need to figure out who they are. Do they meet the requirements for the job, whether it's volunteer or a paid position? Can they adequately do that job? And we need to verify that there's nothing maybe in their background, particularly if they're dealing with children or other vulnerable groups, that they're not going to be a risk to us. Because if they're a volunteer, they're working for our organization, and they can cause us some real challenges when it comes to liability. Each of these volunteers need to be approved. So you need to have your chief executive officer or a designee sign them off that they're on a list of approved volunteers. That gets them the workers' compensation coverage under your policy. If they're not on that list, then they're not an approved volunteer, and that coverage may not be there. Orient and train volunteers similar to the way we would employees, so we don't throw them to the wolves without any ability to protect themselves. Okay. All right. Background checks. A lot of people ask on this, and I'm just going to hit a couple of things on background checks. I did a webinar not that long ago on this. It's recorded. It's on our website, and I think it's called Background Checks. And I go into detail on that. We're a little bit torn here between protecting the people at risk, those vulnerable groups, and protecting other people's rights. So as we talk about background checks, go into it with your eyes open, have a good policy, do legal review on that. We want to ensure that we're treating people equally, that we're being consistent in how we do things, and we need to communicate with them. There are various regulations that fall into play when we're dealing with background checks. One of those is the Fair Credit Reporting Act. And so we have to be careful with that information, and there's certain communications that we have to do when we're doing background checks. So if you're interested in that, go and check out the webinar that I did, and we go into detail on how to put a background check program in place. All right, so how do we manage risk? Well, a couple of important things are inspections and documentations. So, like I said, document regular inspections in all parts of our facilities, and look for specific things, but keep your eyes open to what may happen. These inspections don't happen from the truck. We've got to get out and physically walk through the facilities, look at that fire extinguisher, ensure that the needle's in the green zone. Document those with a form, playground inspection checklist, or a facility inspection checklist, and we have all of these available if you're interested. Football and soccer field inspections, just the same. Remember, if it isn't written down, it never happened unless it's bad. So we document good and bad things. Why do you document bad? Well, so we can show that we've been reasonable and prudent. Bad things happen. Equipment breaks. Sometimes people come and do damage to our facilities. So we document that we identified it and we took action, and that shows that we have done the appropriate things to make it safe again. We document training, so we can show that our employees and volunteers have had the training that they need to be safe. Incident investigation is so important. Taking good information is there. Once again, we'll be doing the loss prevention webinar in February. On the 6th, we'll be on incident investigation. Sign up for that one, and let's do a better job at investigating those incidents. Response to complaints. You should have a log of complaints that come in and what you did about it. So you can, and sometimes we know that bogus complaints come in, and that's okay. Here's the complaint that came in. It was bogus, and for this reason. But when a valid complaint comes in, we need to show that we received it and we took care of it in a timely manner. And then actions taken. Like I said, if we can use police for those parks issues where we've got people inappropriate using our facilities, I recommend doing that. All right. So what do we document? Inspections, repairs, preventative maintenance, policy, procedures, all of these things. What about liability waivers? Good idea, bad idea? The answer is, you see that cute little girl? That's my daughter. She won in mutton busting. Can you believe the fun sucker allowed his daughter to be a mutton buster? We signed off a liability waiver that said that I can put my cute little girl on a crazed wild sheep and allow her to go riding around the arena. Is that liability waiver going to hold up in court? The reality is probably not. They have limited value, but they do have some value. What it is doing is it's trying to transfer risk. We're letting people know, we're informing them this is a risky activity. If my daughter gets bucked off of that sheep, I take that as, hey, if I'm dumb enough to allow her to get on that sheep and ride around, I'm responsible for the outcome of that situation. Now, in a really bad situation, and a court case comes out of it, is it going to stand up? Probably not. But in a lot of situations, parents or somebody involved in an activity will say, you know what, I knew it going into it. I signed the waiver, so I'm not going to go after them. Will it always work? No, but it does have limited use. Control access. If we have a problem with our facilities, we need to be able to close those off. How do we do that? That's really up to you in designing that, but it needs to be a safe method, and it needs to be something that we can do in a reasonable time frame. So if somebody goes out with a can of gasoline and burns up part of our playground, and so the slippery slide's no longer there, how do we close that area? And caution tape is not a barrier to children. they will go right past it. So we need a way to physically barricade facilities, a way to lock them away. So if there's an unsafe condition, people can't get there. All right, and we already talked about this a little bit, but communicate to people what is expected of them, what is forbidden to use at do at our facilities, and what to do if things go wrong. A number. A call-in number. If there's a problem with our facilities, we want to know about that sooner rather than later, even if it's the weekend. Hey, somebody tore down the slippery slide on the playground equipment. We want to know about that before Monday morning so we can take action to protect people. So have a call-in number that goes to somebody. If we need to have somebody that will take those, we probably have somebody on call anyway. But if not, we should look into having somebody that will respond to those calls. Okay. A response plan. What could happen? We have to ask ourselves, what could be a problem at this event? And what do we do? What do we do if that happens? Here's a picture of a rodeo that I was at. And it rained and poured, and then the lightning came along. And do we have a lightning hold policy? And I'm happy to say that this organization did have a lightning hold policy, and they followed it. They had an alert came up, and they told all of us sitting in the stands that we're stopping the event until further notice because of lightning in the area. Please go to your cars. At that point, it was on us. Did we leave to go to our cars? Well, I didn't, because I didn't want my seat to be wet when I came back. But that was my choice that I made at that point. They put their procedure in place, and they did a good job. Okay, there are a lot of these available out there. Don't recreate the wheel if you're trying to build a policy. All right. What if there's an accident? You need to have a plan ahead of time so we know what to do, and we need to train people on it. Who's going to be there when an accident happens? It's probably not the manager that's going to be out in the park or at the sports complex when that happens. So the manager that may know all of the ins and outs of this is probably somewhere else. It's going to be that person that's maybe a seasonal employee or maybe a volunteer. We need to train them just as much as us. And sometimes just having a form so we can gather information, that's important. If we have a big problem, we need to train our people on who can speak to the press, designate a public information officer so we don't have inaccurate information going out or the wrong sources talking about that stuff. We want to collect information. A form is always great, so we can get names and contact information and really what happened. It's important that if an incident happens that we don't go out and admit, oh wow, that was all our fault. Oh boy, that's been that way forever. Those are really damning type comments when it comes down to it. We may not know if we're at fault or not because we don't know the totality of the circumstances. If we have an incident that happens, is it okay to make repairs and fix the problem, or is that admitting guilt? Make the repairs, fix it. That's showing that we're being responsive, and we're also protected by law for making those repairs. We also want to, if this is a bad problem, we want to prepare a response, a plan, a written response, whether a claim comes out of it or not. Let's go into it with our eyes wide open. This could be a problem, so let's gather the information. If it's a bad thing, start a claim so we can get our people working on our adjusters as soon as possible. The earlier they get involved in a claim, the better the outcome because they can put things in place, they can gather information that might be difficult to gather later on. Okay, worker safety, and I could go on this one for a long time, but by the time I got to this point, I said I've got to just really cover this quickly. Same thing goes with worker safety. We need to physically go out and identify our risks to our workers, identify hazards that may be out there. Hazards and risks may be different. And then implement controls, put those in place. Training is so important. That's the reason why that is on the TAP application is to show that you have an active training program that your employees and volunteers participate in, and we've got to supervise. If we see an employee doing something inappropriate, we see them doing something wrong or unsafe, we need to take action. That's for the employee's benefit. It's also for our organization's benefit. And if that employee consistently does that, if they refuse to do things right, we need to take action. And that action could be separation from their employment. And we do this on a regular basis, over and over again. All right. I just wanted to throw out some common worker injuries from a recreation standpoint. Slips and falls kind of drives the injuries that we see, but sprains and strains overall are the real driver there. So once again, all these things go together. Inspect, manage our areas. Look around for those areas that could cause slips, trips, and falls. Uplifts in concrete on our sidewalks. Holes out in our play field areas. Look at our employees and their footwear. Have a requirement in our dress code that they wear proper footwear. I had to throw a pair of shoes out just recently that as the weather started getting slippery, I said, these are not appropriate for wintertime shoes. And so I threw them in the back of the closet. And we'll look at those again after we get past this slippery time of year. All right, sprains and strains. Make sure that we're using proper technique. Proper lifting is good, but what is better is if we can use a piece of equipment to lift really heavy loads, or team lifting, et cetera, et cetera. Cuts and lacerations are really common with people in the recreation and parks world. Are we using proper PPE? Have they been provided with that? I've seen a couple of chainsaw injuries come through as claims in the last year. That scares me, where people are getting lacerations on their leg. Luckily, they have not been extremely serious, but it makes me ask the question: are we providing people with chainsaws, using chainsaws, the Kevlar shafts that are required to use when you're operating a chainsaw, and the other stuff that goes along with that? And we also have some big hitters. Can anybody tell me what the problem is with this picture? Well, we all know what that is. That it may have been the standard when we were younger, but that's an inappropriate thing, particularly when it comes to employees. So here's the action. We've had a couple of very serious injuries to employees falling out of the back of trucks or off of trailers, moving vehicles, in the last couple of years, and so we wanted to throw this out because the areas this pertain to are generally parks and recreation areas. So today, your action is to require a policy regarding riding in the back of trucks. Have you said anything about riding on a trailer? What's our policy on that? If you don't have one, you need to make that policy that says we don't do that. And then review our training. Have we taught everybody that this is an inappropriate action for us to do? And do we take action? Do we go out and supervise those people? And if we see somebody breaking that rule, do we take action on it? Okay. Share this information. Okay. I did it in less than an hour. That's pretty good. 45 was my goal, but I ended up with a lot of material. So I just want to summarize this, all of this material. Tons of stuff that we've thrown out for you today. The big thing is it's January. You're working in parks and recreation. A lot of those activities happen later in the year. We've got time to plan for success, to put programs and policies in place, and get people trained up ahead of time. So we gave you a bunch of challenges today, things to work on. Hopefully you've written those down, and you'll take those actions today. Know what your hazards are. Know your facilities. Get out and inspect the facilities regularly, so you know what's there before it becomes a problem. Think outside the box. Sometimes we can come up with ways that will keep our employees, volunteers safe, and also make it easier to do our jobs. If we identify a problem, fix it. If we and then at the end of the day, document what we're doing, and we'll be able to avoid those problems that go along with these things. Okay, lots of stuff. Just looking for, if you've got questions, go ahead and type those into the chat box or the Q&A box. Thanks, Jeff. I appreciate the kudos on that. We do have, it's hard when it's a one-way conversation. I end up throwing out a lot of material. If you've got questions, I'm not seeing questions come in, but if you have those, please call Brent, Doug, or myself. We're happy to help out there. And let's see, there were a couple other things. Oh, one thing, we did our webinars last week, and we've not sent out the information for those. The recordings, that was for the Trust Accountability Program, TAP 2017, and the Safety in Action Certificate Program. Those webinars are up on the website. I didn't get a ton of response on the Safety in Action certificates. If you want a certificate showing the training that you did with the trust in 2016, send me an email and we'll get those printed up for you, and you can use that for your professional development. The forms, yeah, Jane asked if we'll send the forms. Yeah, I will send out the facility inspection forms. I'm trying to think, is that everything that I think that's mostly what we talked about, but I'll look back through the presentation, and I'll send those reports, those forms out when in the playground inspection. Great, yeah, yes, I'll definitely send those out, and I'll send those out when this recording is available on our website. Sometimes it takes a day or so for IT to get that put up there, but we'll throw that out as soon as we can, and send that out to everybody that signed up for the webinar. Just a quick thing on that: if you're interested in a webinar but you can't attend live, sign up anyway. That way you'll get the announcement when the recording is up on the website. You'll also get forms if we happen to send those out. Okay, it's an hour in. I'm done. Thanks, folks. I appreciate your participation and all the work that you do out there. Remember to get your TAP applications in, and we will see you soon. Have a safe day.